Welcome. In this video, I want to guide you through the creation of legal decision trees and the making of related users interfaces. Should you have any comments, please send them my way. I am currently in the process of publishing a paper on the subject at the Computational Antitrust project. The project is part of Stanford University Codex Center and seeks to advance antitrust law using computational tools. You will find all the links in the description. Alright, so why would you want to design an interactive decision tree? The answer is twofold. First, should you work for a government or an agency, you could give all the companies and individuals access to your tree. And should they plug any software that they use to help with decision making, your tree would play the role of an API that automates compliance. Second, should you be a researcher, as I will show, making legal decision trees is a great way to identify where the law needs improvements. Alright, first let me start with a demo. What you see here is the end result. Users are asked to answer questions without legal jargon and eventually end up with a piece of legal advice. Go ahead, don't, or ask a lawyer. Now, here's how I created this API. As you are about to see, making such an API is what we called a no-code solution, meaning that it does not require any expertise in computer science. This means that any agency could design a similar API despite the lack of technical expertise or financial constraints. All you need is one person to code the legal fields you are interested in, and importantly, to translate legal language into a language that non-experts can understand. Here, I coded EU competition law, meaning that I translated the entirety of the case law into different decision trees, one per practice. When users end up on the green square, this means that the practice is legal. The practice is most likely illegal when they end up on the red square. Once you have all your trees, you need to merge them into one and find a way to guide users towards different branches. You can't indeed expect users to choose what part of the tree is relevant to them, so using different questions, you need to direct users toward the practices that matter to each of them. When you have just one tree, you are ready to transpose it to a software that will make it interactive. Here, I used berkeleybridge.com. What you see above me are different nodes and edges, meaning different branches that are all linked together with yes and no questions. And that's it. You are ready to deploy your tree on your own website. If you want to play with the one I created, you will find the open access link in my dedicated article, linked in the description of this video. Okay, let's move on to the more substantial part. The overall lesson, I believe, is the following. The use of computational tools leads to changes in the substance of the law, here antitrust, and vice versa. Here's why. First, making my EU competition law API leads me to consolidate two situations where users cannot proceed with the analysis. This is worrying as it means that companies in those two situations cannot possibly ensure that they comply with the law. The first situation is when companies lack the information to navigate the tree because they did a bad job at collecting the data. For instance, the assessments of predatory pricing in EU competition law requires companies to assess whether the final price of their product or service is above long-run average incremental costs. Should the company be unable to assess these criteria, it can only blame itself and there is nothing we should do. But the second situation is more interesting. Here, the company cannot assess the practice because it requires information that the company cannot and in fact should not possibly have. For instance, the assessment of margin squeeze requires analyzing whether competitors can cover their costs after paying for access. But companies cannot possibly know that. Plus, This requires being aware of competitors' costs, which could lead to anti-competitive practices such as collusion or abuses of dominance. Here, the law can be improved by eliminating these criteria, asking for impossible to have information. Second, companies often lack the expertise to navigate the tree. And should they acquire the expertise, the entire economy will go through high inflation rates because that expertise is very expensive. Two examples. First, analyzing some practices, such as rebate, requires analyzing whether as efficient competitors would be eliminated because of the practice. The economic meaning of as efficient competitors and the underlying test are well established in the case law, but costly to perform. In my opinion, we cannot possibly ask all companies in the EU to hire in-house economists or to pay for expensive external advice to ensure compliance. Second, the assessment of practices may also require deep legal expertise. For example, the assessment of exclusive dealing begs the question as to whether the practice is imposed on, I quote, many customers and, I quote, over the long term. These terms, many and long term, have a legal sense, such as defined by the courts, but only great knowledge in EU competition law can uncover whether long term means 6 months or 3 years. So I suggest policymakers and enforcers consolidate the case law in a way that non-experts can assimilate. 3, and last, the nature of competition rules makes, at times, the navigation of the API quite difficult. First, the assessment of specific practices requires probing the future. For example, the evaluation of refusal to supply asks whether the practice will limit competitors' production and technical developments. Companies cannot possibly know that. Second, legality tests change. In the EU, the Intel saga shows how the assessments of rebate can vary over time. This means the tree should be taken at face value, knowing that the law is a constantly changing subject. Third, antitrust law reasoning is always subject to case-by-case analysis, whether to know if the practice fits within the legal boxes, such as per se rules in the United States or restrictions by object in the EU, or to assess the effects of the practice. This means navigating the tree could end up in a situation where the practice is clearly legal, or where the practice is, in all likelihood, at most, probably illegal. So the lesson is the following. If you plug the decision tree into a decision-making software, always make sure to put a human in the loop. On that note, thanks a lot for your time and interest. Take care of yourself, and if you can, someone else too. Bye.